Hello, everyone. Catchy13E3 with Catchy Gaming. And it's been, I don't know, a week and a half since my last video. I would like to do one once a week, but my current temporary position has been keeping me busy. I got sent out in the middle of nowhere for a week. So, in terms of just doing maybe anything gaming in my off time to get B-roll or just do anything in terms of working on videos didn't happen in any capacity. And my gaming laptop is still out of commission, which I need to repair that at some point or another. Hopefully, I don't screw that up. And I was going to do the whole generic YouTube Halloween thing when I returned because I was supposed to return at 1 o'clock p.m., but the drive that I had to do was going to only last about 4 hours, so I would have came back around 11 or 12, and I was going to be like, yeah, I'll stream a game. And I was going to do Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, because I've been sitting on this game for a while. Yes, it's an older game, and it has been brought to Steam, but it was on sale for the Switch, so I bought it on the Switch. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about me complaining about more first world problems when it comes to gaming. This case, building your own PC. Now, last time I talked about finding a case that didn't have buttons on top, which, in terms of finding a case that suited my needs, I was not able to find a case with buttons on the front. And I ended up settling for a Corsair 5000D Airflow in white because black kept selling out and I needed a case sooner rather than later, so I settled for white, which I don't see that coming back to bite me in the butt at some point or another. Now, it's not like I actually started with the case and built around that. No, I actually chose a motherboard. And the motherboard that I chose, because of all the stuff that I plug into the back of my motherboard, is this MAG B650 Tomahawk from MSI. Now, I am not very familiar with the various component manufacturers out there, and I'm still not, but this board is a piece of shit. It's been out for a couple of years, and I wasn't looking at it in terms of price. It wasn't really all that much cheaper than when it first originally came out, even though people are speculating that it should be cheaper, and it wasn't. But this thing is a source of a bit of rage when it came to building my PC. No, the easy part is actually installing the hardware. The hard part is the wires, but we'll get to that. This piece of shit of a motherboard. If you've had a positive experience, I'm glad for you, but it seems like a lot of people, when it comes to this motherboard, this thing would constantly, no matter what you would do, would not detect your CPU or your RAM. Both. Now, it seems to be a very common problem because I looked online for solutions. And outside of two incidences where one guy just wasn't getting enough voltage due to his outlet in his house, and another idiot who didn't seem to understand how to seat his RAM correctly, no one had a solution. Not even MSI. And the solution actually in general was return the board, which is what I ended up doing. Now I returned said board after trying every troubleshooting thing out there, removing the GPU, putting the GPU back in, taking all the RAM out and putting it into one slot at a time with each different stick. It was just a whole nightmare, and their tech solution was to do the same things I already did, which I told them I did in the email that I sent them asking if there was a different solution, and then having the balls to tell me to try different components in said hardware. Which is kind of insulting because they know for a fact that most people aren't just going to have spare components lying around to actually try and do different hardware to see if it is the hardware that you actually have on hand. Never mind, I also tried doing things like updating the BIOS. Yes, I learned how to flash the BIOS on a board that isn't even connected to the internet yet. I had to buy a 32 gigabyte flash drive. Who the hell uses flash drives anymore? And I don't even know why they wanted 32 gigabytes. It wasn't nearly that big. But for whatever reason, it has to be a 32 gigabyte flash drive. So, like I said, I ended up just returning the board and getting a different one. Which I should have just gone with this because this is the same motherboard brand that I have in my current rig, which is a Tough Gaming from ASUS, which is a B80 plus Wi-Fi. And when I got everything installed, it turned on the first go, sort of cementing that the MSI motherboard was just a piece of shit. But that's not the only thing. It's been a hot minute since I installed components, and when I first made my first rig, you still had hard drives that required a bunch of wiring. They didn't have solid state at the time, and there were still disk drives, so it made things a little bit more complicated, and the wiring was a bit of a mess. And I won't lie, when I opened up the power source and I got this jumble of cords, and then I also had the fans that I bought to go with it, along with the wire squids sticking out the back of the case. I was like, ugh, I may have stepped into territory that I am kind of confused by, just a little bit. It actually wasn't that confusing. All the cables are actually wired. And again, when it came to that MSI board, the instructions were a PDF file you had to download. They had a quick start guide, but it was useless outside of one image. And to sort of emphasize this little corner here where you plug in your power button, reset button, and LED lights, this MSI board was ass backwards to the rest of the industry. I mean, not really, but part of it was. So I don't know, this could be due to the age of the board, but the power cords for the LEDs on the front of the panel there, you know, where the power button stuff are, they had them reversed in comparison to the wires that were installed on the case. So the plus and the minus were reversed, so I had to cross them over. And on the ASUS Tough Gaming board, they were correct in alignment with the cords that came with the power supply in the case. So go figure. Just another strike against that board. And then there was this goddamn thing, which that cord from the wire squid that comes from the case plugs into the USB, and on the MSI board it sticks out sideways, which it's a huge giant pain in the butt to plug into, and it was flimsy as all hell. I had to get a special connector. Thankfully Corsair had a little adapter for boards just like that. They're like, God, some idiot's going to do some weird thing where it's going to stick in sideways, and it's going to be really hard to install all those goddamn plugs and their flimsy little pins and shit. Yeah, no, they knew that was going to happen, and so that's what you were looking at, is the plugged into the adapter that made it at a 90 degrees so I could plug it straight into it, because you really couldn't tell where you were plugging in the cord and messing up the whole pins. I had to bend a couple of them back into place because of the weird angle it was on that MSI board. I can't emphasize how much of a piece of trash that board is. And then my dumbass had to figure out where this cord went. Turns out it was also part of that little bit of wire squid that came with the case. And that leads to a hub where all the fans plug into. Well, not all the fans, but most of the fans that pump air in and out of the case right there. Yeah. And I guess this is actually a bit of a negative for the Corsair power source because the cables they gave me were like 3 feet too long. Okay, it's not 3 feet. It's a really long cable with multiple connections of the same kind, and I only needed the one. But now I just have this jumble of cables with more connectors than I actually need in my case just to power that fan hub. And speaking of those fans, I had to daisy chain all of them together. And when I talked to my brothers, like they didn't have long enough cords just to go into the hub. I'm like, no. And I'm kind of like, you probably shouldn't be daisy chaining, but I don't have much of a choice because all the fans that I bought from Corsair have these little itty bitty tiny cords that you're clearly supposed to plug the other fans into in order to get it to connect, and it was a whole entire pain in the butt to get all those connected and make sure they worked. Now the fun doesn't stop with the wires there. See, I also bought an MSI GPU, like one of the ones that were licensed out to it, and they made their own version of it, and I'm hoping that doesn't bite me in the butt on like the motherboard. But it came with this thing right here. You're supposed to connect 2 different PCI cables from the power supply and plug it into those, and then plug that into your GPU. See, this is where I got a little confused because I looked at that picture and I had the cords from the power supply already plugged in at the time. So I was sort of a bit confused, even more so than before. And that's mainly due to this cord right here, which does the exact same thing as far as I can tell, that came with the power supply. But I'm like, which one should I use? Should I use the one that came with the power supply, or should I use that weird adapter that came with the GPU and just use the 2 extra PCI cords that Corsair clearly anticipated would be a thing? So I ended up just using the adapter, hoping that is the correct decision. And then there's installing this big huge honking heatsink because I'm doing an air-cooled build because I've done the water-cool thing and it doesn't seem to really help all that much. So we're going to try doing a big old heatsink with a bunch of fans. It's probably going to be a bit noisy, but we'll see how it works in terms of temperature. And that's where I ran into another problem. How do I attach these fans to this big-ass heatsink? And I had to look up a whole entire video of how to clip them on there. And I'm sort of like, still a bit skeptical, but they seem to be holding fast, so I guess it's fine. But after all said and done, I finally got everything together, and it was much easier now that I knew where all the wiring went, more or less, along with the guide with the ASUS motherboard being much better than the MSI one. I got everything attached in a few minutes, and it started up successfully on the first go, like I previously mentioned. With one tiny little problem when I first did it, because the CPU is getting hot and it automatically shut down, and I just installed the heat sink because I was just testing it to make sure that it actually turned on in case I needed to do a lot of troubleshooting things, and that big old heat sink would just be in the way. But after I attached that heat sink, it stayed on, and it's ready to have a OS installed, which is a whole other conundrum because I was trying to find my I guess, backup stick for the OS for my old rig, so I could use the key on it to see if I could get Windows 10 installed on it and see if I can get it to upgrade to Windows 11. But I can't find it because I don't remember where I put things that I put away years ago. And on top of that, it probably wouldn't even upgrade to the recommended version of Windows 11 for gaming purposes. So I am now waiting on a thumb drive to be sent to my house with the recommended Windows in order to install it, and we'll go from there. So yeah, first world gaming problems. Building a PC with a bunch of wires and really questionable manufactured parts. I'm looking at you, MSI. I know it's a bit of a rant, but it's what I had because I'm actually working on a Zelda video with the Twilight Princess manga. Thus why you see the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess footage, because I have that, and that's what B footage I have available right now. And on top of that, I'm being sent back out for another week. So yeah, but it'll give me time to finish up that manga, and then I will start working on that video. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.